Hello, and we haven't got my screen oh, here we go. Good afternoon, Glenis Gassmann, more customers, more profits. Welcome to the Drive Home with the RoB Academy. We're talking business, and today we're talking with Elizabeth and Elizabeth Michael, who's a commercial lawyer at City Pacific Lawyers. How are you, Elizabeth?
Hi, Glenis, how are you?
I'm good. I can see you're still typing up a quick email just to finish off for the day. So
yes.
I'm going to introduce.
Sorry.
That's okay. We're going to introduce. We've got Phil East. Phil East is a coach. How you going, Phil?
Good, good. Good day, Elizabeth.
Good day.
Good day, Chris.
And we have Chris, who's driving home, typically doesn't speak because he's not allowed to speak while he's driving. Well, he actually can, but he can't touch the phone. So we don't want to get him into trouble. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for being on the call. And today we're going to be talking about the legal side of business, because we all know that business is a big beast. I talk about that all the time. And today we're going to be focusing more on the legal side. And that's why we've got our expert panelist today, Elizabeth, talking to us. She's going to be talking to us about retail and commercial leases, but we know that there's a lot of other areas in legal that make up legal, and we might diverse onto some of those as well. So I'm Glenis Gassmann, more customers, more profits. And what I do is I help business owners create more business and actually turn that into profits. And we're coming to you from the RoB Academy, and the RoB Academy is all about teaching you how to grow your business. We have an online e-learning system that if you become a member of the RoB network, Referrals Over Breakfast, you get free access into this academy. And Phil, I know that you've utilized the RoB Academy content. Tell us a little bit about, your idea, what you've found with that RoB Academy so far.
It is unbelievable, Glenis. The information in there is powerful. It explains what you need to know, and importantly, it aids you to actually implement and tells you what you need to actually do to make things happen in your business. And that's extremely important and very, as I said, very powerful.
Yeah, and as you know, implementation is the key. It's just the key to getting your business moving on. And I just want to welcome everyone else that's to the call tonight. We're coming to you, live from Melbourne, actually, and around Victoria. Phil, you're over in, whereabouts are you today?
Gippsland today.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're from Gippsland. And Elizabeth.
Yes.
Hello, how are you? Welcome.
I'm very well on this wet afternoon here in Brighton.
You're in Brighton.
I'm in Brighton. Coming to you from Brighton today.
Can you see Port Phillip Bay?
Sadly, no. Oh. I'm not in the high rent district, Glenis.
Okay, got it. So welcome. Thank you for making the time. I know you're busy.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for making the time to come on board and have a chat to us. I know you solve problems for small business owners around legal areas and especially around property law. And tonight
yes.
we're going to be focusing on property law. So tell us a little bit about your business. Why did you get into business in the first place, and how long have you been in business for, and why you did it,
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, those are all very good questions. So going back a ways, I'm originally from the United States, but I came to Australia in 1991, and I started my practice in 1993. So I've been a small business owner myself for all of that time. And so I have a very deep understanding of the day-to-day concerns, challenges that are involved in running a small business. In terms of my own personal background, I have always been a commercial lawyer, and as part of that commercial law concentration, the expanse into property law was sort of a natural progression because most businesses, one way or the other, have property law issues. So if you're a small business renting an office, or if you're a cafe renting premises, then the complexities around the legal issues of leasing is something that we've looked after for many, many years. and I'm an accredited specialist in the area, having done the accreditation in 2011. So we get a lot of work around and a lot of concern around the issues of leasing and renewing leases and leasing disputes, whether there's landlord and tenant issues and the like. So it's quite a significant part of our business, and we handle everything from reviewing documents for people looking to get into leases, and also the helping people resolve disputes around leases, whether it's between landlord and tenant. Both sides we get involved in, and advising people along the way to hopefully avoid getting into those sorts of disputes.
Yeah, no, great, and thank you for sharing that with us. And I know that you know, a lot of people think that law is boring, and oh my God, I don't want to talk about that, you know, or it's always going to be expensive. Okay, so you know, I'm going to, you know, firstly, thank everyone for being on the call. I know we've got another couple of participants coming on board. Thank you so much. It's great having some expert panelists on the ride home. And Chris is on his way up to Ballarat, so that's where, that's why Chris is driving. So, you know, for me, around legal and things like that, you know, as I've been a business coach, and I know Phil can contest to this as well, being a business coach, is that it's really important when you start off in business, or even if you've just been in business for a year or two, to get a relationship going with a lawyer, because you just never know when you're going to need them, you know, and it may not even be in property law, but at least, you know, having somebody that you know, like, and trust, someone that knows their stuff, that can actually help you out when you need it, like being proactive. I talk about the A team that you need in your business, and one of those is the lawyer, okay, and one's a business coach and the other one's an accountant, okay, so they're your A team typically at the moment. So do you have people coming to you, forming relationships, you know, just they don't have anything they need right now, but, you know, they may want to use you in the future, or they may not, you know. And by the way, for your participants that are attendees on the call, put your questions and answers in the Q&A chat, because Elizabeth is going to be answering some questions later on in the show. So I'll go back to that question. Do you find that people come to you, are proactive and wanted to engage with you and find out a little bit about how you could possibly help them?
Yes, look, certainly we get involved with conversations with people who are very early in their business life cycle, so to speak, where they just decided to go into business or starting their business in terms of forming the structure, whether it's a partnership, a company, and the like. Probably though, like most things in life, we tend to get people coming to us when they've had an emergency situation. There's a dispute that's keeping them up at night, and they suddenly have a need for immediate assistance. But having said that, I very much agree with you that any business needs a lawyer, an accountant, a business coach to keep things moving along. And it's far better to have all those connections when things are going well, rather than when you're in an immediate dire straits. And in other words, similarly with an accountant, you don't want to go off and find an accountant when the ATO is knocking at your door for an audit. And it's similar to having those relationships with a lawyer as well. So look, we often form relationships with the people early on in their business life cycle, and we have always offered an initial no obligation consultation so people can come and meet with us, make sure we don't have two horns on our heads, that we're nice people, because you do need to be able to work with the people, you know, and you do need to have a level of comfort if you're going to be engaging with other professionals. So we've always offered that, and it's always a good idea to take advantage of something like that, because when the need arises, you then have somebody that you feel comfortable picking up the phone and ringing and getting them involved. So I very much agree with your sentiments on that.
So just on that, Elizabeth, if I may, sorry, Glenis.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I was going to throw to you, Phil, and actually say, you know, do you have any questions of Elizabeth?
Well, just on what you're talking about and taking advantage of that, that for an initial appointment to get to know your lawyer. Now, the saying sort of goes that you should always see a lawyer before you go and see a lawyer. But just last webinar, Chris mentioned about my bookshelf. So I went to my bookshelf and I found my trusty yellow pages, and there are lots and lots of lawyers in there. So what necessarily should I look out for, or when I do go and pick one, when I go and talk to them, what questions should I ask, or what answers should I be listening out for?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. So obviously, whatever your legal issue is, you want somebody who is a specialist in that area. You don't want somebody who just dabbles. And the reason I say that is because the law is a very complex beast, and there are many tributaries to it, and you really want to get somebody on board who specializes in your area of law. So, for example, we're talking today about small business. So you want somebody who, if you have a small business inquiry, that has an understanding of not only the legal issues that confront a small business person, but also what it's like to run a small business themselves, so that they understand the types of issues and the pressures that you're under in terms of running a business. So very much about picking the right professional for the right job. Now, I guess that then comes to the question of, well, how do you know whether or not the person you're talking to is experienced in those areas? The thing that I would recommend is, again, going and having a meeting so that you can feel comfortable, and whether you want to bring another professional along. So oftentimes I'll have meetings with clients and their accountants, especially if it's a particular issue that's on the boil, and we work together collaboratively to get a result. But I guess the other area would be, so for example, somebody rang me and said, look, I've been run over by a car, and I've got a personal injury claim. I'd say, well, that's a terrible story, but I don't do that sort of work, and I would refer you on to somebody who does. So we very much specialize in business law, commercial disputes, and the property area. And so the main thing is to ask the questions that give you a level of comfort that this is something that they don't dabble in, but that it's their bread and butter, so to speak.
Thanks very much for that.
Do you actually, so thanks, Phil. Do you actually have like a meet, like do you just meet with people and not turn the clock on? I know that's
yeah.
As an accountant, I know I used to have somebody say to me, they'd ring me up and go, now, Glenis, have you got the clock on?
Right.
But, do you actually meet with people and engage with them, 15, 20 minutes, just say, hey, yes, I want to find out a little bit about your business, and, you can utilize our free, you have some free information you can give out to businesses. What sort of things do you give out to them for someone that's just going to take the initiative, be proactive, come to you and go, Elizabeth, I want to get to know you. I'm starting off a business, or I'm in business and I don't have a lawyer on my A team. What do you give them? What do you say? Yeah. Yeah.
So generally speaking, the way that we work is that if somebody has an inquiry, they can ring us and book in a time. And again, the initial consultation is complimentary. There's no charge, and there's no obligation at the end that they would engage us.
Yeah.
And during that conference, we find out about their business and what issues they're facing. If there is work that needs to be done, then, and this would apply to any solicitor in Victoria, but we scope the work, and we give the clients an initial quote if there's work to be done. Certainly if it's just a meet and greet type of appointment and there's nothing to be done at the end, well, there you go. There's some of our marketing collateral. Keep it on file, and when you need us, give us a call.
Yeah.
We also run workshops and things like this, so people can get into our mail out system, so that if they might get an invite for different talks that we've got on the boil. But essentially, at the end of a conference, if there is something that's pressing need, we would scope that work. We would provide a quote, we generally email that through, and then if the person is interested in pursuing that, then we would then send them our formal engagement documents. And it sounds rather convoluted, but we're heavily regulated in this area as solicitors in Victoria, and so we follow that procedure. And then, of course...
so all lawyers, solicitors in Victoria have to follow that. You got to scope the work.
Yep. So essentially, we're required to commence the relationship by sending a costs agreement. Now, when I say commence the relationship, I'm talking about in a very strictly lawyer-client type of this matter. There's going to be a legal matter that when there's going to be work to be done. But of course, the way we operate is that anything prior to that is not on the clock. It's you need to get to know us. We need to get to know you and your business so that we can give you the best type of outcome and service. So that's how it works from our perspective.
And I know that you're running a workshop this weekend, I think. Are you?
Yes. Yeah, I am running a workshop this weekend.
Tell us a bit more about that one.
Yeah, so that one is a workshop that I'm running in conjunction with some other property professionals. That workshop is on Saturday morning at Milano's, and it's for first home buyers or first time investors looking to get into the property market. So anybody who's familiar with the property market will know we've been through a little bit of a slump, and after the election there's been a bit of an uptick, and so people who may have been not willing to be in the market for the rising prices are seeing a bit of an opportunity to maybe jump in. And so we've got the spring selling season coming up. So this is a seminar that's focused on first home buyers or first time property investors, the things you need to be aware of if you're sticking your toe in the water and getting into the market. What are the sort of things you need to do to protect your legal interests? We've also got a mortgage broker speaking, somebody who provides mortgage insurance, and I believe an estate agent to talk about how to actually negotiate with the real estate agent as well. So it's
so it sounds like a whole. So tell us where it is and the time and.
So it's at Milano's this coming Saturday, the 31st, starting at 9 a.m. So
how long does it go for?
It goes until 1, and that sounds like an awfully long period of time, I know, but it'll be an action-packed
sounds like you've got a fair bit to go through.
There's a fair bit to go through, yeah.
Sounds good. And is it free to come along?
It is free to come along, which is great value to get all that advice for free. And if anybody was interested, I can send them the link. If they send me an email at emichael, E-M-I-C-H-A-E-L, at citypacific.com.au, I'll make sure that they get the link sent to them to register. But it is free, but registrations are required.
Okay, also, and I think we sent out this link out to people who have missed the call and they want to listen to the recording, because there's always such a lot of great information on this recording, and we've already got so much from you already. So we could possibly put that out as well, and if you give us to promote that through the RoB Academy. So Phil, I know as a business coach, you have people that are growing, they're not in the incubation startup phase, which, we have them at all stages, and we know that they need to get like a lawyer on their A team. But, when it comes down to licensing, they've already scaled up, they've done the work with you, they're scaling up, and they start needing to get into a little bit more systemization licensing type of information. What sort of things as a business coach can you offer them, and then how do you work in with the lawyer on that? Like, how does that work? Can you explain that to us and all the attendees tonight?
So as far as it's a very good place to be. If you go through the RoB Academy and you get to this stage, you're doing extremely well, and the 52 weeks there will certainly get you to this stage. So in licensing and intellectual property and knowing where you're at, repetition, what the RoB Academy and what business coaches can do is help you form those systems and processes and whatnot, and then we go to the solicitor or the lawyer to talk about how can we bed those down, how can we protect them, and how can we make them all above board so that the consumer is protected also. Would that be about right, Elizabeth?
Right. So with intellectual property licensing, for example, or protecting intellectual property, there's a number of areas of intellectual property that you might need to protect. So, for example, a trademark is protected by registering a trademark. But if you were going to license it, an example that I've got on my desk at the moment is a franchise is a typical example of licensing. It's a lot. You really, if you're a franchisee, for example, you're licensing a bundle of, or you're receiving a license of a bundle of different rights, whether it's the way that the management system works, the right to use certain trademarks, as to how you brand your business, right down to the system, might even be uniforms that you're wearing. So, and they're generally documented. It's very important to document, and depending on the industry you're in, there are different rules and regulations that might apply. For example, if it's in franchising, for example, there's a franchising code of conduct that everyone needs to comply with for it to be legal. By the same token, I've got another matter where a client of mine is the owner of a patent for a particular procedure. He's going to manufacture that under license. So he's going to grant the rights to a third party to manufacture under using his intellectual property this device that he's invented. So that's a way that he's scaling up his business. He's not on the tools doing it himself. He's engaging with a third party. He's still going to market the product, but he is engaging with a manufacturer to manufacture the items pursuant to his formula, if you like.
Yeah, no, I get that. So one of the things that I know that a lot of attendees, on the call I know there's a couple of questions sitting in there, but one question I have of you, Elizabeth, first is, before we go to those questions, and that is, what are maybe the three biggest risks that small business owners, because we're talking to small business owners, they make up about 85% of businesses out there. What are the three biggest things that you feel they need to be protected by in business? In
business in general?
Yeah.
Well, I won't address it from the point of view of accounting and taxation, because there's a lot that we small businesses have to comply with on that front, but that's probably, that's a talk for another day. But essentially, anytime you're being asked to sign anything, it's important, if it's a legal agreement of sorts, it's important to get that document reviewed, because once you've signed, you've got no ability to back out of it, so to speak. So, or not without significant difficulty. So getting things, I guess, really just placing your feet carefully as you're walking along in business is really the way I'd put it. So don't sign things that you don't understand. Get advice about that. The other thing would be that if you are entering into any sort of transaction, do your due diligence. And what does due diligence mean? Well, it's really just doing your homework. And I regularly see where people sort of fall over in this area is where they leap before they look in terms of signing or committing themselves, and they haven't properly documented the legal relationship that they're entering into with somebody, or they haven't actually done any due diligence before they've signed and committed themselves. So, for example, to put it in a very common everyday example, you wouldn't go and walk on a lot of a car yard and just get into the first car you see and sign the papers and drive off. You do your homework, you check it out, you do some research online and whatnot before you actually committed yourself to buy that sort of car. And it will be the same thing with commercial legal arrangements. And so where I see people falling down is where they haven't properly documented it. It might be because it was a family member that they were doing the deal with, which is a big, I guess, point there, whether it's, you know, your brother-in-law or some family member where you think, oh, look, we know and trust each other, we don't need to document this. Well, people's memories fade over time, and they tend to be selective depending on what the nature of the circumstances are.
No.
I guess, yes, it does happen, Phil, I swear. And then, and then
That had never happened in my family.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a family lawyer, so it doesn't take, you don't have to speak to too many who'll find they're very cynical about, you know, what goes on in families. So
is that a phrase you hear very often? It'll never happen to me. That'll never happen in my family.
I can tell you heaps of stories around partnerships of friends that would come in to my accounting practice, and they'd want to set up a business, and I go, the first thing I said to them was, what's your exit strategy? You know, let's write that down. Then I'm going to send you off to a lawyer, and I'm going to get that document. You're going to sign it. Then we'll set up an ABN. You know, it's like, because as you know, probably, I'm not sure if you deal with this, Elizabeth, but as you know, like most partnerships, whether it's family or whether it's friends or whatever, they tend to just fall out of love with each other after a few years. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Even if you've co-owned a property together, you know, whether it's an investment property that you want to go into with somebody else, that legal relationship should be documented, because at one stage or another, you're going to want somebody's going to want to walk away from the deal. And I totally agree with you on the partnership shareholders agreement area. We regularly see people who are, you know, falling over themselves to get into business with somebody, but you need to kind of plan with the end in mind, because sooner or later, one of you will want to get out of the business, or one of you might just die. And what happens then?
Exactly.
Are you going to buy them out? What happens with, you know, how is their estate going to be remunerated for their share in the business? So there's a lot of planning that should be done around that, because there's a lot at stake, and relationships can be preserved if you had asked the hard questions and had the hard discussions at the beginning, and documented what will ultimately happen down the track, or what you foresee happening down the track. If during those conversations you find out, well, look, this person's completely unreasonable, or I don't think that we're going to be able to deal with one another on that issue, well, better to know at the beginning.
Exactly. Then you don't bother signing. Yeah.
So
it's like, it's like through that process, what I'm hearing is that you really are preempting the honeymoon throughout that process, and you really are testing each other out on, what about this, what about that, what about this, and depending on how they deal with that will depend on whether you're going to sign or not, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hey, I've got a couple of questions. Sorry,
sure.
I've got a couple of questions for you. From Tim to Elizabeth, I have a 3. Thanks for joining us, Tim. I have a 3x3x3 lease. Am I obligated to take my option, or is my landlord able to refuse my taking up of that option?
Okay. Well, I'll assume that the lease is a retail lease. In Victoria, we have the retail leases. Most regulated leases are retail leases in Victoria because of the breadth of coverage that the Retail Leases Act has on leases. So even premises that you might not think would be considered a retail lease, because of the way the definition of retail leases is defined in the Act, and also because of case legislation, I'll assume that it is, because there's so many leases that are considered now retail leases. But 3x3x3, that means that essentially there's a 3-year term and then 2 further options of 3 years. And you've got the ability to exercise that option, and that's an option that the tenant has. Yeah. The question is, can you exercise the option? Generally speaking, most retail leases would say that there's a time frame within which you must exercise the option in writing, and usually it's no more than 6 months and no less than 3 months before the end of the term. and you must do that in writing. However, if you are a tenant who has been in persistent breach of the lease, say you haven't paid the rent, or you haven't paid the outgoings when they're required, or you've done something else that has been in persistent breach, the landlord can find a reason not to allow you to exercise your option.
Right.
But if you're a law-abiding citizen and you've paid your rent on time and you've abided by the terms of the lease, then you really almost as of right have the right to exercise your option for a further term.
Right. And
provided you do it within that time frame in writing.
Okay, awesome. So Tim, I hope you got that. Thank you for that. Yeah, he says, yes, he's happy with that answer. So good. He's written up on there. Hey, and I'd also have something else that I know Phil's probably been wanting to ask you, but I'm just going to jump in before Phil and say, you know, do you have any actual horror stories you can tell us about, like the common horror stories that you can share with us to help us avoid them?
How long have you got, Glenis?
I have my bottle of kombucha here. It's not beer, everyone.
Okay. Oh, sure. Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Let me see. Sort of in the retail leasing area, I've got, since we've just had a query on that one. Yes, I've seen situations where tenants might sign a lease again without it being reviewed, and there might be problems with what they've signed, and it doesn't suit their business. So, for example, there are inquiries that you need to make around whether this premises are suitable for the use that you intend to put the premises. An example would be a client of mine who had, and he would be probably the poster child for how to do it the wrong way. He had a dream of starting a groovy wine bar in the suburbs. And so he located these premises and he entered into negotiations with the estate agent who was advertising these premises for lease. And he paid a bit of money to the agent to give him access to the premises. So he took possession of the premises. Again, no documents were signed. And he began to renovate the premises to make it into a wine bar. It had been a curtain store selling, you know, curtains. So extensive renovations needed to be done. And he'd spent about $50,000 or $60,000, and he realized in the course of his renovations that there was a major load-bearing wall that couldn't simply be knocked down, and it would need to have engineering specs done to it to shore it up before they could do anything. So this was going to significantly increase the cost of what he wanted to do to turn this premises into his dream wine bar. So that was problem number one, is that he just went in without any plan, if you like. He was going to do a lot of the work himself to save money. The second thing he failed to overlook is that he would need a planning permit to use the premises as a wine bar. He needed to apply for a liquor license, and before he could get a liquor license, the local council had to agree that the premises could be used as a place that serves alcohol. It was in a suburban shopping strip, so there were houses around, and so there's, you know, they're very careful about who they're going to allow to have a liquor license, and so he had then decided to make inquiries to the council, and the council basically indicated that, look, you're not going to get a liquor license that serves alcohol late. And so he thought, well, look, this isn't really going to suit this premises. I need to stay open late in order to maximize the income from being a wine bar. So and then finally he explained to the landlord, look, this is all not working out for me. I'm going to bring the keys back to you. And the landlord said, hang on a second. You started demolishing the interior of this building. You need to have to put it back where it was. And so they've fallen into dispute now about who needs to pay for what and all the rest of it. So that's probably a horror story that I could share with people. Now, what would you do? How would you fix that and do it properly?
Oh, yeah. Like, you know, when you talk wine
just do
bar,
that. Just throw my hands in the air. Just go, I don't know.
Yeah.
When you talk wine bars, it just takes me back to my single days. when we used to go to this wine bar in Randwick, and they were open till 5 o'clock in the morning. That's why we went there, because we could go there after we've been to the nightclubs, and they would stay open, and we could still drink champagne and orange juice at 2 o'clock in the morning and listen to, you know, Jimmy Barnes and my name, my
and you're trying to tell us that is kombucha. Anyway, I'll move on.
We'll move on.
Now, sorry.
You go.
Just a couple of things that I'll just go back to the RoB Academy again, because there's so much stuff in there, but there's some great strategies around joint ventures and referral partnerships, and monetizing those.
Yes.
When it comes to full disclosure, and going back a few years, we had the cash for comment on the radios and all that.
Oh, yes.
Where do we sit in legal terms as far as having to tell someone that, hey, I'm going to get a kickback from this referral that I'm giving you?
That's a very good question. The answer is, it depends. In the legal industry, for example, I've never paid or received referral fees because we're required to disclose those to clients, and the paperwork is horrendous, and it's not something I've ever wanted to get involved in. So in my industry, if somebody was to pay me a referral fee, or I was to pay a referral fee, there's disclosure that needs to happen to the client, and I've just never done it. I also understand that if you're in mortgage broking, for example, and you pay referral fees, you are again under the regulations that I guess are promulgated by not ASIC, but the ACCC that licenses brokers. Again, there's disclosure requirements.
Yeah.
So if you're in a regulated industry like those, you're definitely going to need to look at what your requirements are in terms of paying or receiving referral fees. But if you're not in those sorts of relationships, or you're not in a heavily regulated industry, I don't think that there is necessarily any obligation to disclose that to a potential client.
Yeah.
However, from the point of view of good governance, it might be that's something that you should consider doing, given that otherwise it potentially could affect a reputation if it's the case that there are referral fees going back and forth. But I don't think that there's any legal regulation that would require it. Having said that, if you're in a referral relationship with somebody, you would want to document what that is. You would want to say, look, for example, I know sometimes estate agents might get together and co-sell a property because it suits them. One's more active in an area and the other one's got more expertise in selling this type of property. They'll co-list a property. They would obviously want to have an arrangement in place where they're confirming with one another what that split would be, for example.
Yeah.
Cool. So just one more, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
Now we had Chris talking about some social media on prior webinar. How careful do I need to be if I'm replying to a bad review online? Can I get myself into big strife there, or is everything reasonably lenient around that area?
Well, I'm sure no one's ever given you a bad review online, Phil. So this is
No,
an
well, you're correct,
entirely
yeah.
hypothetical question.
That's it.
Look, I think your question is around defamation and whether you're defaming somebody's character. So certainly, if you publish untrue statements about somebody online, or whether you do it in The Age, it's the same kind of legal analysis that applies. If you put something out there that's set there to defame somebody's reputation, then it would be, in my view, actionable. So you could certainly pursue somebody if they wrote something negative about you that's untrue. What happens in practice, of course, is that it can be very difficult to remove negative reviews on, say, on Google My Business, for example. People can get, and I hear there are now services springing up with people supplying this into the social media industry, an ability to remove those negative reviews if they are in fact unfair. I've heard of people sort of trolling somebody's business and putting a negative review to be a menace, if you like, rather than it actually having received any service from that business. But in terms of, strictly speaking, somebody who is setting out to defame somebody's character, it's actionable, whether it's online, as I said, or published in The Age.
So that's great question, good question, Phil, and great answer, Elizabeth. And for everyone that's on the call tonight, just get your questions in now if you want. Last few questions we'll take before the end of the night. And, you know, social media is becoming more and more popular. And my question to you is, Elizabeth, you know, is online law, like, if you know, I'm not sure, and I know it's off topic because you're typically into, you know, commercial law as far as property goes, but is online law, is it keeping up with what's really happening out there? Because you do hear a lot of people that are getting bad reviews from non-clients, or you get people defamating, you know, other people online and bullying and this stuff like that. Have we caught up in legal terms with all of that?
Well, you know, I think the interesting thing is that people, you know, there are, the internet allows people to hide behind a made-up profile, and there can be, you know, troll accounts, if you like. And so that's actually very difficult to police and to control. In the old days, of course, if you published any statement or you said anything, you know, you can't hide behind some fake profile. It was you who was saying it. So I think that there is a problem that things that are published on the internet are harder to prevent. People are more fearless because they're doing it anonymously. So no, I don't think that that we're keeping up in the regulation stakes in that regard. Certainly, you know, there are court cases now finding their way through where, for example, some of the social media platforms like Facebook are having to be more accountable for what the content that they allow to stay up. We've only, you know, have to turn our mind back to the atrocities that happened in Christchurch with the shootings there, and and Facebook having that material up that was streamed online. So there's certainly a movement now that people have that social media platforms need to take a greater level of responsibility because they're essentially, if you like, a newspaper or a television channel, in the sense that they're giving people the platform to disseminate views, opinions, material, content, and the like. So
I might have to stick to my dance videos on TikTok, I think, and embarrass my kid.
Well,
Okay.
I know that we are getting up to the top of the hour, and I know that people are driving and they're wanting to get home to their families. So firstly, I want to thank Elizabeth for being on the call and really giving us so much great information. Just recapping what I got out of tonight is, you know, like basically is don't sign anything in business, get some advice, do your due diligence, basically do your homework, and really be proactive to get, you know, a great lawyer, and Elizabeth is a great lawyer, to get on your side, and being part of your A team. Get to know your lawyer and be proactive about, you know, having a cup of coffee with her. She's not going to charge you, and she actually has a workshop this Saturday if you're interested in taking up some of the opportunity that's out there in the property market right now. Elizabeth and a few of her other people are going to be giving you lots of advice between 9 and 1. Where is it at again?
It's in Milano's in Brighton.
Milano's in Brighton.
Is on Beach Road in Brighton.
Beach Road in Brighton. And Phil, have you got one last word to say to wrap up with Elizabeth? Before?
I wrote about 5 pages of notes, Glenis, and I think you nailed it with your summary there.
Okay,
I just need to know what did the lawyer name his daughter?
Oh no, not a lawyer joke. I don't know.
Sue.
Sue. Boom boom.
Happy Father's Day.
That's great. Now, I also want, just before we head off tonight, next week, so thank you, Elizabeth, next week.
Yes.
We have Dave Dixon is coming on as a panelist, and Dave is with Alliances, and he's going to talk to us about joint ventures and setting them up and what really is a joint venture between a couple of businesses. So we might even need you on later again to talk about, partnerships and joint ventures again, I think, or we'll be throwing to you anyway, Elizabeth.
Okay, no worries.
Thank you so much for being on the call. Thank you for driving home with us, talking business. Check out referralsoverbusiness.com. Jump onto our RoB Academy. If you want to grow your business, you want to scale it up, you want to get in and start doing that work and implementing it, you're going to grow your business, then you need to see people like Phil or myself, and then we can actually help you coach yourself, coach around you getting bigger. Chris, thank you for being on the call as well. I know you're driving home. I don't know if you're there or not. It's been a pleasure. Thank you all so much. Have a great, fabulous week.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.